Hey there, listeners. Do you ever feel like you and your spouse are stuck in a never ending argument loop? Well, today we're discussing a way to help you break free from those exhausting conflicts and rediscover the connection that brought you together in the first place. You're going to learn the fears method and how that can transform your marriage from a battleground to a haven of understanding and growth. And yes, it is possible even for you. Welcome back, my friends, to Fulfillment Therapy. I'm your host, Kendra Nielsen, and on this podcast, we talk about how to take your fulfillment to the next level in marriage, parenting, and personal growth. Today, we are talking about conflict resolution in marriage using the fears approach that I developed because so many people needed a very simple way to work through things, and I'm going to show you how to do just that. I decided to talk about this today because I've had several of the couples that I work with talk to me about how it just feels so impossible to work through conflict and they almost feel like these toddlers trying to navigate these steps. And I'm like, okay, we're going to make it super simple, super easy. There's one story recently where she said, you know what? I just feel super triggered. And so we broke it down what was happening in this one argument. And she said, you know what? I get really reactive anytime he talks in this angry voice or gets a little bit critical. And that reminds me of when I grew up. Like my parents were really critical of me. And he said, I really don't like it when she doesn't listen to what I'm saying and hear me and just respond with some validation. Actually, he didn't say validation. I don't think he had the awareness for that. But essentially, that's what he was saying. And I hear the same type of thing over and over. Now, the reasons are different. We have different backgrounds on what is triggering to us and why that keeps you stuck in this loop in your marriage, and what you can do about it. So, we're going to break that down today because I know it's not just my clients that are struggling. I know my husband and I do this all the time, and we know these steps. So, all of us need a little extra help. Also, don't forget to check out our blog and sign up for our weekly emails as well as our courses. We have simple courses, very affordable, very flexible, that will help you take your life to the next level. It's such a minuscule amount and such a small commitment. Why wouldn't you sign up for those things that can help take your life a little bit further when it comes to personal growth, when it comes to marriage? And very soon, and in the next several months, we're going to be releasing one for parenting as well. Or you can go ahead and start your own business, your online business with that passive income that will help you have a more flexible lifestyle with your family members. With that beginning course, find your focus. And then the two follow-up ones we will have in the future, in the near future, are Launch Your Podcast and Podcast Profit Mastermind. So those are coming up just so you are aware. All right, now let's get back into conflicts. How can we resolve them in simple ways that don't make your brain hurt and don't make you angry just thinking about them? Well, when we have these unresolved conflicts, they lead to resentment and this emotional distance in our relationships. Now, I mentioned just a minute ago about that story about my client that were trapped in this cycle of these arguments. They were both at their core feeling like they were not good enough, or at least that their partner, their spouse, thought that they were not good enough. And that kept them in that cycle. So, how do we break free from that when we are constantly being triggered or activated by something that's said or done around us? Like, how can we create healthy differentiation, like letting go to however our spouse responds and getting grounded ourselves? It is not easy. I'm fully aware of that. I tell myself that all the time. Like, I can do this. This doesn't need to be that hard. And it really isn't if we'll just break it down like this. Every client, once they start to really practice this and nail this, what they tell me is that family peace increases so much. They just naturally are more kind to their children, more patient. There's less triangulation where drawing closer to one child or another child or all the children and distancing themselves from their spouse. In all, there is so much more peace at home. And I know that we all want those things. All right, so enough talking. Let's get to how we can do that. Now, I may have mentioned this before. There's a bunch of different angles that I take it from, but this fears approach is really helpful. And even if you have heard it before, it has been long enough that you probably don't even remember what it stands for. So, fears stands for feelings, experience, activators, responsibility, and strategy. And I'm going to say that again because I want you to say those in your mind until you remember them, because you're going to need to know what they stand for if you're going to use them on the spot. So, feelings, experience, activators, responsibility, and strategy. So those are just 5 steps of what you can do to get out of this negative conflict spiral. Now, before you begin the fears steps, and I'm going to tell you how again, I want you to ask yourself a couple questions. Can you discuss this whenever you're doing it? Could you discuss it calmly? Are you ready to understand your spouse's perspective? Can you share your experience without trying to convince your spouse? If you can answer those in an affirmative, then you can proceed. Not until then. So make sure you do your own processing, talking to a healthy mentor, whatever you can do before you do this, okay? So number 1, share how you felt. So this is where you express your feelings without explaining why quite yet. Avoid commenting on your spouse's feelings. And this is a quick example. Maybe you could say, I felt hurt and disappointed, instead of saying something like, you made me feel really hurt. Now, the second step is describe your experience. Take turns sharing your perspective. This is hard for some people. Please take turns and don't talk when it's not your turn. Remind them gently, because often when you're starting to get activated or you want to share your part, you're going to jump in, and we are not doing that here. Summarize and validate each other's reality. So even if you don't necessarily understand it or agree with it, it is their reality, so you can validate it. For example, you could say, I understand that you felt ignored when I was on my phone during dinner. Regardless of the reason you were on your phone, like maybe your mom was in the hospital, you can still validate that they felt ignored. Does that make sense? Peter Drucker said, the most important thing in communication is hearing what isn't said. The third one is explore your activators. Discuss those past experiences that might be triggering those current reactions. And this is when people really start to understand and relax a little bit, because they recognize it's a layered story, if you will. Share how these memories influence your present behavior. So in the case of the story that I told you earlier, I think I might have even shared part of it. She said, when he gets critical or when he has an angry voice, I start to feel my heart rate rise. I start to be angry. I start to want to fight. Like I go into that fight mode and I just get so reactive. Well, fight, flight, or freeze. In this case, because of her activator, she is wanting to fight and engage. Whereas other times, the memory, maybe the memory is something that caused you to freeze or to run away. Well, whatever it is, you're being activated, and it's exploring what that is with curiosity instead of with judgment. So think about that with yourself. When's the first time you can remember feeling a similar way? And this requires more self-awareness and a back and forth discussion. That's why it's important for it to be calm with each other to try to determine what that is. For a lot of people, this is the hard part because maybe they don't have a lot of self-awareness. The fourth one, take responsibility. Acknowledge your role in the conflict. Focus on your actions and not your spouse's. My friends, this is so hard for my clients. It's so hard in session when we're together, and it's even harder when nobody else is looking. So own your part. Focus on your actions. I can own my part when I called you a jerk. That was not okay. I shouldn't have done this. That wasn't her side of the street. And her side of the street, she was willing to own. But it's how you communicate that will help take it out of that spiral or that cycle that you're in, that negative conflict cycle. Another example could be, I realize I shouldn't have minimized your concerns about our finances. That could just be something simple. It doesn't have to go into a lot of detail. As a matter of fact, it's better if you can keep it more concise, because the more words we put in, the more often it leads to conflict. Roy T. Bennett said, "Take responsibility of your own happiness. Never put it in other people's hands." And I want to go back to that for just a second. I've been thinking so much the last probably 6 months about differentiation. It really is a skill that you have to practice and hone to differentiate, to not go into that enmeshment. And I've talked about this a lot in the last year on podcast episodes, but is where you can stay grounded and make space for people being their own individual and their family. But as far as you are able to calm yourself down and do what you can to separate yourself from the other individuals and respond in a healthier way, having this healthy space. And that is not easy to achieve. I have to keep going back and exploring what that looks like for my clients, even for myself in my different relationships. You often think you might be really confident and have that differentiation, and you all see layers that are more and more enmeshed in ways that you didn't believe that they were. So when you are differentiated, it is so much easier to not put your happiness in the hands of others. So, for example, if your spouse is really angry or reactive or whatever that is, you do not have to respond in the same old ways, but you can have this healthy emotional distance from that where you can still love them and be grounded and not react to their reactions. It does take practice. Okay, last but not least, number 5, improvement strategy. So this is where you collaboratively develop a strategy for those future situations. This is where you're specific about the actions that you are proposing. For example, next time I'll put my phone away during dinner to give you my full attention. That can be as simple as that, or else it could be, I am going to be very careful about the words that I use and not call you names, but instead ask more questions for clarifications instead of just assuming the worst. And try to remember that we are both generally trying to do the best that we can, and we're not trying to hurt each other. So not jumping to that conclusion too quickly. All right, I just have a couple more tips for you for preventing yourself from getting into that reactive cycle and those reactive responses. It all goes back again and again to that grounding or that mindfulness. So notice your thoughts without judgment and use that stop technique that I teach my clients a lot. And that's an acronym and it means stop. The stop technique, you start with stop. The second one is T, take a breath. O is observe, like just notice what's happening. And P is for proceed. So you give yourself space to just calm down, get curious, think it through instead of just reacting all the time. And then the third one is implement a timeout signal with your spouse when you are too activated and you know it's just going to go somewhere unproductive and you're going to say more and more things that are just going to be fuel for a bigger argument. And no, it cannot be the middle finger. Making effective repairs. So how can we do this? My friends, it's really important to choose the right time. Wait until you're both calm and then be sincere with your apology and specific about what you are sorry for. Follow up with actions that demonstrate that you are committed to change. Now, maybe that's a kind voice text, like if you're not feeling like you can speak face to face without engaging in that conflict again, but something very heartfelt and thoughtful. Maybe it's a Marco Polo. Maybe it's a different thoughtful little gesture, whatever it is. Or maybe it's pointing out the good when you see that they are following through on different things and not in a condescending way, but in a very gracious and loving way. Tony Robbins said, "The quality of your life is the quality of your relationships." So in conclusion, my friends, I hope you remember that acronym, but I'm going to tell you one more time and say it in your head 3 times so you don't forget. Here's the recap on that fears approach. So feelings, first talk about your feelings, your experience, then your activators, then your responsibility, and then strategy. So feelings, you share your feelings, E, your experience, and then A, activators is with the past, and R, responsibility, taking that ownership, and then S, that strategy or plan. So use these in your relationship, and this is what will take your communication to the next level and really bring that peace to your home in so much more abundance, as long as you actually practice these and change those neural pathways in your brain. Thanks for listening, my friends, and I will see you back here next time. Don't forget also to please, please, if you have not, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast app that you listen on. That is how we get seen. And that is a very, very simple way that will take you maybe 2 minutes that will help us get seen and spread those positive ripples and allow us to do more good in the world. So you might think it's a very small thing, but I promise you it is not. Very few people actually act on that invitation, and it keeps us from progressing. So thank you for those of you that have, because that support allows us to get seen and do so much more to help spread those positive ripples in this world. So thank you again, and I'll see you back here in just a few days.